Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really cutting through the noise, going straight to the core of high-security data recovery. We've got some source material here that, honestly, it reads like a training manual for, data protection architects. It's an analysis focused on deploying a PowerProtect cyber recovery vault. So if you're looking for that definitive, detailed breakdown, what it really takes to build a secure, isolated fortress for your data, well, this is your deep dive. Our goal, pretty simple. Unpack the most critical configuration steps, the core security design, the advanced tools, all distilled from the D-PCR-DY-01 certification knowledge base. That's the PowerProtect Cyber Recovery Deployment Engineer exam.
Yeah, and that context is it's absolutely crucial. We're not just talking about, general best practices here. These are the non-negotiables, the fundamental requirements. The D-PCR-DY-01, it's a serious assessment. You need 70% correct, 65 questions, just 90 minutes.
Oh, okay. That's tight.
It is, and that level of rigor means everything we cover today, from like a IP best setting to the ML algorithms, it's all foundational. It's basically the high security checklist for a real world vault.
Okay, got it. So let's start right at the beginning. The absolute groundwork. You're deploying the core virtual appliance, the vault's brain, say in VMware ESXi. The source material really hammers on one set of config parameters, things you must lock down before you even start the software install. What is that essential first step, and why be so strict about the timing?
It boils down to the foundational network settings. We're talking the VM's IP address, DNS NTP, and the default gateway.
The basics.
The absolute basics. And you might think, oh, why sweat the small stuff? But in a high security vault like this, integrity hinges on getting these right from the get-go.
So it's more than just like making sure it connects.
Yeah.
If we mess up the network time protocol, NTP, what's the immediate disaster scenario?
Yeah.
Especially thinking about recovery or forensics.
Well, it's maybe not an immediate crash, but it's a massive compromise for security and compliance later on. If NTP drifts, you lose your definitive timeline. Yeah, think about it. An incident happens. You absolutely need immutable proof of when data was replicated, when the vault connected, when logs were written, all of it. Without accurate synced time, you instantly kill your audit trail, you cripple any forensic investigation, and honestly, you could even breach compliance regs that demand a verifiable chain of custody.
Okay.
The vault has to prove its timeline. NTP is the official timekeeper, no wiggle room.
That completely changes the perspective. It's not just connectivity, it's fundamental proof.
Okay.
Okay, so appliance is secure, time synced. Now, getting the actual production data into the vault. Since it's designed for isolation, it obviously doesn't just, passively grab data. What's the specific administrative step needed to set up that trust relationship, to start managing production data inside?
Right. You have to explicitly tell the vault where the data is coming from to allow backups from a production PowerProtect data manager system, a PPDM, to be managed by the vault. The admin must go into the cyber recovery UI and formally register the production PPDM system as a storage asset.
Registering as a storage asset, is that like similar to just whitelisting an IP, or is it more involved?
It's definitely more formal. Think of it less like whitelisting and more like establishing a sanction control pathway, a formal introduction. It's the action that says, okay, this specific PPDM environment is authorized to replicate into this specific vault. It creates that necessary trusted relationship before any data even thinks about moving.
Okay.
Dictates the source of truth for the data stream, which is, fundamental to keeping the vault isolated from junk networks or, worse, compromised ones.
Okay, now let's get to the really interesting part, I think. The air gap. The whole point of the cyber recovery vault is this isolation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Protecting against network spreading, stuff like ransomware. We know it's usually a virtual air gap these days, not some are physically unplugging cables.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that separation actually work? What's the mechanism, the time-based thing that maintains it?
Yeah, the isolation is all about strict, scheduled connectivity. The network linked to the production side, it's not always on. That's key. It gets enabled specifically only during scheduled data sync windows, replication windows.
And the rest of the time, dead connection.
Completely disabled. That's the default state.
Right. But, some people might argue, well, a virtual air gap isn't a real air gap. They worry that software could be tricked, maybe exploited, to keep that connection open longer than planned. Does the architecture address that kind of skepticism? Is there a specific operational detail?
That's a fair point. But the mechanism is typically designed to operate below the layers malware usually targets. Think network segmentation, maybe firewall rules tied to schedules, sometimes even separate physical switches managed out of band. The connection is disabled by default. So even if, say, ransomware hits the production PPDM when it tries to reach the vault, outside that tiny scheduled window, the door's locked and bolted. It's not just software monitoring. It's often network controls disabling the path.
Okay.
The security posture is basically deny all access unless it's precisely this time for this authorized purpose.
That puts a ton of pressure on the operations teams then.
Mm-hmm.
Focusing on that controlled timing, how do organizations plan around that narrow window? What if they, I don't know, miscalculate the time needed for replication?
Well, yeah, that's the core operational challenge, absolutely. You're constantly balancing data freshness, replicating often enough, against minimizing exposure time.
Right, the risk window.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If your scheduled window is too short for the amount of data that changed, the replication job fails.
Not good.
Not good at all. And if it fails repeatedly, your recovery copies get stale fast. So the key is really precise planning. You need to calculate your data change rate, your available bandwidth, add some buffer time, and just make sure the vault stays connected for the absolute minimum time needed. Every extra minute that link is live, that's an increased attack surface. Simple as that.
Okay, let's zoom in on something inside the vault environment itself that helps keep things locked down. The data domain interfaces using DDBoost. The data domain system, that's where the data copies actually live inside the vault. How do those specific DDBoost interfaces need to be configured to maintain that strict confinement?
Right. This is a great example of defense in depth. For maximum security, those DDBoost interfaces on the data domain system within the vault, they must be configured to communicate only with the PowerProtect cyber recovery software appliance.
Only the appliance.
Yeah.
So even though they might be on the same internal vault network segment, the data domain can't just chat with the production environment directly, or even other random systems inside the vault's network.
Precisely. They're firewalled off internally, essentially. This confinement makes sure that all the replication traffic stays strictly within that secure, isolated vault communication path. Think about it. If somehow some threat did get past the perimeter, maybe landed on some other management server inside the data center,
Yeah.
that threat still can't talk directly to the secure storage targets because those DDBoost interfaces, they're only listening for and talking to that one specific cyber recovery appliance. It's like an internal firewall designed for extreme isolation. Stops data leaking out or being messed with, even if there's some kind of internal breach.
Okay. Wow. So we've secured the entry point. We've built the perimeter with a timed air gap. Data's inside, and even inside it's confined, but there's still that huge potential problem. What if the data we copied was already bad? How do we know we didn't just replicate some dormant ransomware? Or maybe corruption that was sitting in production but hadn't, activated yet? This brings us to that intelligence layer, right? CyberSense. What exactly is CyberSense doing inside that isolated vault to check the data's health? What's the tech?
Yes, CyberSense. This is crucial. It applies machine learning algorithm-ML to analyze those backup copies inside the vault. And critically, it's not just doing a basic file check or looking at metadata headers. It digs into the content itself. It analyzes patterns of change within the data.
Okay.
It's actively looking for signs of malicious activity, like ransomware encryption patterns or subtle data corruption that, frankly, traditional backup checks would likely miss entirely.
Why does that level of analysis, the ML part, really matter, though? Can't you just run a good antivirus scan on the copies? Or maybe check file hashes to see if they match production?
Well, a hash check tells you if a file changed, but not how or why. Antivirus is looking for known malware signatures. Ransomware, especially newer strains, might encrypt files in ways AV doesn't recognize yet, or it might slowly corrupt data over time to evade detection.
Ah, the slow burn.
Exactly. ML is trained to spot those anomalies. Things like abnormal file entropy, which indicates encryption, or unusually high rates of change in specific folders, or file signature changes that just don't fit normal user or application behavior. And because the vault is isolated, CyberSense can run these deep, resource-heavy analyses on the copies without slowing down your production systems. It gives you that verified clean status before you even think about recovering.
It really is the ultimate safety check then. You run the analysis inside the secure vault, so if disaster strikes and you need to recover, you're restoring data that's essentially been certified clean by like a dedicated AI analyst.
That's a great way to put it. It absolutely is. It shifts the whole recovery process. You're not just restoring a copy, you're restoring a certified clean copy. And that assurance, that's the core value of the entire cyber recovery setup.
Right. And, that whole discussion really leads to a final thought, something for you, the listener, to think about, especially around high security data management. We established that the air-gapped connection, it's only active during those specific scheduled replication windows. Okay. Organizations, they want to minimize that connected time for security, obviously. But they also need to guarantee they can recover data and that the data isn't too old, meeting their recovery point objective, their RPO. So this raises a really tough operational and, frankly, business question. How do organizations effectively communicate and then reconcile that unavoidable trade-off? The trade-off between maximizing isolation time, which means more security, and minimizing RPO, which means fresher data. Especially when data volumes and change rates are just exploding. It's that constant tension, isn't it, between ultimate safety and ultimate availability, something to chew on.